As the Srako engines hummed softly in the background, Captain Grady stood transfixed by the hollow table. Shadows of a massive, abandoned structure flickered in blue across his stern face, an ancient station adrift at the edge of the unknown. He tapped the controls, coaxing up fragmented schematics of the enigmatic colossus. "Quite the eyesore, isn't it?" grumbled Mackenzie, the ship's engineer, idly gnawing on something hopefully not integral to his toolkit. "Indeed," Grady concurred, eyes locked on the hovering images. "Yet, it's the mysteries it holds that concern me, not its aesthetic failings." Armin, their lean pilot, relaxed in his chair with a nonchalant air. "Well, one thing's certain, it's a relic. Dead for eons, no life forms, no transmissions. It's ripe for the taking." "That was the sentiment of the crew before us," Grady retorted, the memory of their derelict vessel haunting his tone. "Found adrift, all systems dead, 30 clicks back." Armin offered a dismissive shrug. "Perhaps just a stroke of misfortune." Grady's gaze hardened. "We're not here to rely on fortune. You're both here to ensure we exit this not just breathing, but better off." Mackenzie's smile flickered with greed. "Breathing and loaded, hopefully, as long as you stay suited," Grady responded crisply. "Prepare yourselves." They suited up swiftly, their movements refined by routine. The station's ancient shell embraced their craft as docking clamps locked with a sharp hiss. Leading the entry, Grady's boots echoed metallically against the structure, the airlock groaning open to reveal a darkness so deep it seemed to pulsate. "Activate lights," commanded Grady, his voice clipped with urgency. Their helmet lights pierced the gloom, illuminating corridors festooned with cryptic alien scripts and the corrosion of ages. Overhead, pipes wept strange, dark fluids. "Delightful," quipped Mackenzie, though his humor masked unease. "Concentrate," snapped Grady. "Armin, find us a route." "Mac, locate any power hubs." Armin fished out his scanner, its display struggling against the alien architecture. "Feels like a labyrinth here. No direct route to the core visible." "Fantastic," Mackenzie muttered. "Guess we're on a delightful wander, hoping not to disturb whatever did in the last visitors." Enough, Grady's own nerves frayed at the edges. They delved deeper, navigating past alien technologies and frosted-over chambers, the air oppressive even within their suits. "Captain," Mackenzie's voice crackled through the comms, detecting weak power signals ahead. "Might be the reactor." "Excellent. It'll need to be functional for us to access the archives," Grady confirmed. "Advance." They entered the reactor chamber, a behemoth of technology quietly resonating with dormant power. Mackenzie whistled softly, a myriad of controls. "Sure you want me fiddling with these? Just keep the explosions theoretical," Grady half-joked. His focus split as Mackenzie set to work. The reactor began to stir, its hum intensifying, lights stuttering unerratically. "Captain," Armin's voice tightened with alarm, "we have an issue." Grady wheeled around, hand instinctively on his weapon as a chilling mechanical shriek echoed down the corridor, followed by the scrape of metal on metal. "Report," Grady demanded. "It's a drone," Armin reported, tension spiking his words. "Definitely not friendly. Positions, now." Grady's command was sharp as he drew his pistol, the light from his beam cutting a swath through the encroaching darkness as the angular, menacing form of the drone skittered into view, its sensors glowing ominously red. Grady scrambled to his feet, reloading his pistol in one swift motion. Mackenzie, still at the console, hammered at the keys in desperation. The light from his screen cast eerie shadows as the larger drone prepared for another assault. "Keep them off me," Mackenzie shouted over the roar of gunfire and the whir of approaching drones. Grady nodded, firing a precise shot that took down one of the smaller drones mid-lunge. Its metal carcass clattered to the ground, sparks sizzling from its severed circuits. Armin, crouched behind a fallen panel, sprayed plasma bursts at the advancing drones, his face set in grim determination. "Almost there," Mackenzie yelled, sweat dripping into his eyes. His fingers flew across the alien keyboard, trying to hack through the encryption. The larger drone, undeterred, aimed its next volley of plasma directly at Grady. "Move," Armin cried, tackling Grady just as the plasma stream hit where he had been standing. The impact melted the metal floor into a glowing puddle. Grady rolled to his feet, feeling the heat radiate off the molten floor. "We need a distraction," he yelled, ducking as a drone's claw swiped at him. Mackenzie, his eyes wide, looked around desperately. "The reactor. If I can overload it, it might give us a chance to break the lockdown." "Do it," Grady commanded, firing another shot that disintegrated a drone's sensor. Mackenzie typed rapidly, his breath heavy. The console began to whine, a high-pitched sound that grew louder by the second. The larger drone paused, its sensors tilting towards the noise. "It's working," Mackenzie exclaimed. "The reactor's going critical. We have minutes, maybe less. Everyone to the airlock," Grady ordered. They sprinted towards the exit, the floor trembling beneath their boots as the station structure protested the reactor's strain. As they neared the airlock, a swarm of drones converged on their path. Armin swung his rifle, bashing a drone aside, while Grady fired in quick succession, picking off the approaching machines. "Here!" Armin shouted, slamming his hand against the airlock control. The door slid open just enough for them to squeeze through. They tumbled inside, Grady slamming the control to close the door. They caught their breath in the dim light of the airlock, listening to the muffled chaos outside. "We're not out yet," Grady said, checking his weapon. "That reactor won't hold much longer." Mackenzie, his face grim, nodded. "I set it to blow. We need to detach from the station. Now." Grady turned to Armin. "Pilot, that's you." Armin nodded, already moving to the ship's controls, strapping in. This is going to be a tight exit. As the ship disengaged from the station, the reactor's final overload echoed through space, a silent burst of light that engulfed the station. They watched through the viewport as the station fragmented, the drones caught in the explosion. Grady let out a long breath, watching as the remnants of the station drifted away into space. "Close call," he muttered, glancing at his crew. "But we made it. Next time, let's pick a less lively spot for salvaging." Mackenzie managed a shaky laugh, wiping the residue of fear and exertion from his brow. "Next time, let's just hope there isn't an automatic lockdown feature." They settled in for the journey back, the tension easing as the danger receded into the star-studded blackness behind them. Just as the drone's cannon began to glow with imminent discharge, Mackenzie slammed his hand down on the final input. The reactor's status lights switched rapidly, a warning klaxon blaring through the station's corridors. "It's done," Mackenzie shouted, pulling back from the console. Grady nodded sharply. "Everyone, move to the escape route now," he ordered, not waiting to see if his command was followed as he led the charge. They sprinted down the corridor, the station trembling beneath them as the reactor began its meltdown. Behind them, the sound of the massive drone's movement grew louder, its mechanical strides echoing ominously. Armin covered the rear, firing back at the swarm of drones that buzzed and clattered after them. The lights flickered, casting stark shadows that danced on the walls as the station's systems started to fail under the strain of the impending reactor explosion. The path to the emergency airlock seemed interminably long, but they pushed forward, driven by the dual threats of destruction from behind and the promise of safety ahead. As they neared the airlock, Grady slammed his hand against the control panel, and the door slid open with a hiss. "Inside now!" Grady yelled, pushing Mackenzie ahead of him. Armin followed, turning to unleash a few more shots at the drones before diving through the doorway. Grady was the last to enter, glancing back to see the large drone rounding the corner, its cannon aimed directly at them. He threw himself into the airlock, slamming the control to close the door. The door sealed shut just as a blast from the drone's cannon hit, the impact reverberating through the airlock but failing to breach it. Panting heavily, Grady activated the emergency release, and the airlock detached from the station. The small craft they were in shuddered as it propelled itself away from the station, the view from the rear viewport showing the drones halted at the airlock, unable to follow. "Everyone okay?" Grady asked, his voice hoarse as he checked on his crew. Mackenzie nodded, looking pale but intact, while Armin was already checking the craft systems to ensure they were on a safe trajectory away from the station. As they put distance between themselves and the station, the entire structure began to glow ominously from the inside, light shining through every port and crevice. Then, with a blinding flash, the station exploded, sending shockwaves through space. The blast was massive, consuming everything in its vicinity, including the relentless drones. They watched in silence as the debris from the station spread out into space, the threat it had posed now neutralized by the reactor's overload. Grady finally relaxed, slumping against the wall of the airlock. "That was too close," he murmured, wiping a smear of soot from his face. Mackenzie managed a weak smile. "You got to admit, Cap, it's never boring with you." Armin, still monitoring their escape path, chuckled dryly. "Let's just hope our next job is a bit less explosive." As the adrenaline faded, they settled into their seats, the immediate danger behind them but the vastness of space still ahead, filled with both opportunities and unknown threats. They were survivors, and this was just another tale in their ongoing journey through the cosmos. The hall was chaos, lights strobing, alarms blaring, and the station's structure groaning as it began to come apart at the seams. The reactor's hum was now a deafening roar, the final countdown echoing ominously throughout the metal corridors. Grady pushed his body to its limits, sprinting as fast as his suit would allow. The airlock was just ahead, Armin and Mackenzie already inside, waving him forward frantically. Behind him, the massive drone regained its balance, its cannon realigning with lethal precision. "Grady, move your ass!" Armin yelled through the comm as Grady neared the airlock. The drone's cannon fired. The blast blast seared the air just behind him, its heat blistering the back of his suit. He threw himself forward, rolling into the airlock just as the doors began to close. The force of the blast reverberated through the small space, nearly knocking them off their feet. Mackenzie slammed the control to seal the airlock, his face white as a sheet. "Are we clear?" he gasped, struggling to catch his breath. Grady picked himself up, his heart still pounding in his chest. "Do it, Mac. Detach now." Without hesitation, Mackenzie hit the detachment sequence. The airlock shuddered violently as it disengaged from the doomed station, propelling them into space. They watched through the porthole as the station receded behind them, the silhouette of the drone visible for a fleeting moment before a blinding light engulfed everything. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of space, but its impact was felt through the airlock's frame. Violent shakes followed by a sudden, eerie stillness. The remains of the station scattered into the void, a million fragments of metal glittering like stars. Armin let out a long, shaky breath, leaning against the wall. "That was too close," he muttered, his voice hoarse. Grady checked the systems, confirming they were on a safe trajectory away from the debris field. "Next time, we might not be so lucky," he said grimly. Mackenzie, still pale, managed a weak smile. "If there's a next time, I say we stick to picking up scrap metal on uninhabited moons." Grady chuckled dryly, the adrenaline slowly fading. "Agreed. Let's call it a day, boys. Let's head home." The small craft drifted away from the chaos behind them, its course set for safer skies. Inside, the men sat in silence, each lost in his own thoughts, the weight of their narrow escape settling in. As the stars passed slowly by, the dangers of spacefaring life were once again starkly highlighted. Yet the allure of the unknown still called to them, as it always would. For now, though, home was the only destination they desired, a chance to regroup and maybe laugh about how close they'd come to being just another lost crew in the endless expanse of space. The small craft, Morocco, glided smoothly away from the wreckage, the silence of space enveloping them like a cold blanket. Grady remained at the viewport a moment longer, watching as the last flickers of the station's destruction faded into the dark. The debris spread out like a silent testament to their harrowing escape, a stark reminder of the fine line between life and death out here in the void. He finally turned from the window, the afterimage of the explosion still dancing in his vision. He faced his crew, both of whom were quietly attending to their stations, the tension slowly draining from their shoulders. "We'll need to log this," Grady said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through him. "Every detail. The guild will want a full report." Armin nodded, his hands moving over the controls with practiced ease. "They'll think we're making half of it up," he said with a half smile. "Then we'll show them the sensor logs. Let them see the truth of what happens when you push too far into the unknown," Grady replied. His gaze shifted to Mackenzie, who was monitoring the ship systems. "Keep an eye on the hull integrity." The shockwave wasn't gentle. Mackenzie gave a thumbs up, his earlier panic replaced by the calm that comes after surviving a disaster. "Will do, Cap. She's holding up fine for now." Grady moved to his chair, settling in and strapping himself as Morocco began its journey back to civilization. His mind replayed the day's events, each decision and close call. They had gambled with their lives, as they often did, but today they had one. "Armin, set a course for the nearest Federation outpost," Grady commanded, his thoughts already turning to their next steps once they made landfall. "Already on it," Armin replied. The ship hummed beneath them, a comforting constant amidst the chaos they had left behind. As space stretched out before them, a canvas of endless stars and possibilities, Grady allowed himself a moment of reflection. They had seen things no other had, faced dangers that many wouldn't believe, and yet, here they were, still pushing forward, still surviving. Grady's eyes drifted closed, the weight of exhaustion settling in. His last thought before drifting off was a simple acknowledgement of the harsh realities of space, tempered by the thrill of the unknown. In space, luck is what you make it, and today, we made it good.